So, Joe, what were you looking to do here tonight?
Record a podcast. Hopefully.
Yeah. Said you're going to record a podcast. What did you mean by that?
I mean, I was thinking that, like, I would just sit down and maybe have a drink and laugh with my friend. That was the plan. But
Yeah.
I may counter that with Mark. Do you have any problems finding the place? Did you get here all right?
What? How about we just go ahead and have a seat? How about we do that? Let's go ahead and have a seat right there.
Oh my god! Like, it is amazing how, like, that opening can be done like 3 or 4 times within an hour, and every week or so, and it doesn't get old.
No.
And and at the same time, like, how people can hear that line and not instantly be like, "Oh fuck, shit, yeah, you got me."
Well, so wait, okay. So for those of you who aren't in on the joke, Joe and I are talking about To Catch a Predator, which is this just absolutely ridiculous piece of pop culture history from the early 2000s that we'll get into how it still actually exists today.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, there was a time and a place where not everybody got the Chris Hansen joke about, hitting on minors and him being there to get you when that happens. So, I mean, Joe, did you watch To Catch a Predator when it was first on the air, or did you find it later?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, define first on the air, because initially, like, this show was not under that title. I think I watched it when it became To Catch a Predator and it actually gained traction, because before that I believe it was Dangerous Web, and I was not on the bandwagon yet for that time. Especially since I've mostly been like anti-reality TV for the most part, but this is that odd exception for me. That rare bit where it's like, you know what? I will sit down and watch this tonight because it's on, and I need to see what's going to happen this week.
Yeah, back when people were actually still standing around water coolers and, pretending that they loved their wives and their spouses. This was a time when this was actually something that you would talk about in person as it was airing. And I just said a horrible statement, by the way, about loving your spouse.
Yeah,
But
I was gonna say that is a very, very odd thing to bring up during this particular
you know what,
episode.
though? People held down that, like, those relationship struggles back then. They didn't really, like, broadcast them, right? And
No, they sought. Apparently, some people sought minors over the internet to take care of that problem.
see, look at that, topical. It's topical again, right? but,
God.
but yeah, to your point, my parents used to watch Dateline almost like every week. So Dateline was this chance to, like, get the really hard-hitting pieces of news that were maybe a little more theatrical than just, the stoplight did not work on 4th Street today, causing a minor traffic, collision or whatever. No, this was like, these were the very meaty stories that I think they knew were going to catch ratings. And so within Dateline NBC, as you mentioned, Dangerous Web existed, which then became To Catch a Predator, hosted by Chris Hansen. And, man, am I thankful it was there. Good Lord.
Well, I mean, it is the hard-hitting investigative journalism that few people knew they actually needed and wanted to see in their lives, and was eye-opening, despite the fact it was something that everyone kind of knew was going on anyway. Because while we are going to joke several times throughout this episode, if you are aware of the show To Catch a Predator and you've watched it with us, you've probably had some time to digest the content and really just, realize that it was on top of hard-hitting, I guess, journalism, was a bit of a cultural and pop culture phenomenon for the time. But for those of you who have not watched the show or any of its iterations, the concept of the show is that men who were looking to actually hook up with minors on the show were intercepted by a journalist with the help of an organization we'll get to in a little bit. And I would like to note that pedophilia is usually a pretty hefty topic. But if you watch the show and you've been on the internet for more than a minute, you'll probably understand why we're making jokes about it to this day. So while we do want to stress the actual safety concerns of any online interactions or like interactions with meeting people from the internet, please always be sure who you're talking to before you meet up with them in real life, and to make sure that they are of legal age.
And now, there's one thing to point out here, though. Even Chris Hansen was very careful not to call the people that were involved in this show pedophiles.
Yeah.
Because the individuals may or may not have truly been attracted to younger individuals. And who knows what could have been going through their minds. We're not here to really understand that. But to your point, Joe, if you are listening to this episode and you see topics of assault and, of course, grooming underage individuals, if that kind of thing is offensive or upsetting, we do not recommend that you listen from this point onward, as we'll be discussing topics that will, of course, be very much involved with that. But yeah, to your point, Joe, this show was very unique because I think all of us are familiar with the concept of like a sting operation and hanging out in a car waiting for something to happen and then catching a person in the act. But to catch a predator was much more in depth than that. And Joe, how did they achieve that effect?
So how they did this is they actually had a pretty more I would say thought out operation here, as opposed to just kind of sitting around areas where youths hang out and like in a van or like a black sedan and just waiting for predators to show up and then bust them. No, because this was a time when if you were going to meet someone online and talk to them, you did so in something called a chat room, which is a very, very dated thing. I believe they're still around. Definitely not as popular as they used to be. But literally, it was just an online messaging forum where you could go in, you'd get in a room, digital, of course, with a bunch of people, and you just start talking to them. And, if you're of this era, you may have popped the good old ASL question to someone to see their age, sex, and location. And what this show did is it had a organization called Perverted Justice, who were citizens who were trying to expose people who were going online to prey on minors. So along with this organization, Chris Hansen and Dateline worked together to catch these predators in the act. Eventually, in later, not even like later seasons, but I think it's like season 2 or 3, you start getting law enforcement actually involved. Because it turns out in many states within the United States, even soliciting a minor online without even actually meeting them is a felony offense. So just saying that, hey, let's meet up, hook up, and do anything that is illegal, if you even type that online, it is a felony if you have the knowledge that someone is underage. So they would work together and hire, what would they always say? They would hire a 19-year-old actress who just appeared younger than she was, and would basically have a house set up. She would go to the door, kind of not meet them at the door, but as they're getting out of the car, say, come on in, the door is unlocked, walk into the house, and as they got in, she would no longer be there. She would say something to them in the distance, they would get comfortable, and out pops Chris Hansen, catching the predator. And from there, they would work with local law enforcement to then actually apprehend and take these people into custody. And that is the general gist of every little section of this show.
It's incredible to me that they would essentially start this show with this like half-baked concept that we're going to trap the predator, or at least entrap them for a moment. But for the first 2 seasons, they would let them go. Like they could freely walk out the door. And it's the exposure that was truly that was the punishment. It wasn't so much the act of what they did, even though, as you mentioned, Joe, like in the years following, this would become a felony in a lot of states. Some already were, but they weren't necessarily always working in those. So that was the thing that freaked me out at first, was that these guys are getting let go.
Yeah,
they could commit an offense again because there's all these like legal issues, and things that just hadn't really been created yet to do anything with this, because the To Catch a Predator folks would take all the information, the transcripts, the laughable AOL instant messenger conversations that you would see, and they'd pass it all off to them and have them pursue it. So it was a very different dynamic in the beginning compared to literally having cops in ghillie suits jump out when these guys would leave.
Because really, like, the most you would get is, like, you would, of course, have your face on national television with your name and whatever screen name you used to try and get this child to meet up with you. And that really was the worst of it. And, of course, you know, you can change all of that if you really want to, other than really, I guess you can change your face. That's totally possible. But I think for a lot of the people who are on the show, financially, the most they could afford to do was just change their screen name. Which is probably why it's best that eventually law enforcement did get involved.
Yeah. Well, just think about it this way. I mean, the liability of getting somebody that, frankly, we don't even know the mental state of, trapping them in an enclosed area. I mean, that's a massive blind spot to leave, not just for law enforcement, but for all these civilians who are working together to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
And, Joe, would you want to be a part of that?
I mean, not entirely. I mean, even, like, you can tell that while obviously that Chris Hansen is, I think, God, I don't want to say you can tell he's enjoying what he's doing or anything at the time, but you can definitely tell how serious he's taking every minute with these people he's in the room with, because, like, one, pretty much always, like, a very, very, like, I don't want to say a stone face, but concerned face. He's always, like, got his eyes obviously, like, on that person, momentarily only looking down to see, like, the transcript of the conversation that was had online between that individual and perverted justice. But one thing that you'll see him do very frequently and hear very frequently is he never lets anyone put their hands in their pockets. He will always say, I need your hands out of your pockets. I need you to put your hands in your pockets. Put your hands on the table for me. Sir, I need you to sit down. Like, very, very, I wouldn't want to say suggestive. Like, he's actually pretty commanding when he does this. He's like, I need you to sit down. I need you to take your hands out of your pockets. And so you can tell that, especially in these earlier seasons, when he isn't quite used to everything going on and it hasn't become kind of a rhythm for him, he's very concerned about being alone in the room with these individuals.
Yeah, which kind of makes the whole exchange in the early episodes just that much more tense. Because, I mean, the first time you watch it, of course, I mean, this is going back now almost 20 years, but the first time I saw this thing, and these guys come in there and they don't know who Chris Hansen is, and you know, he's obviously interviewing all these guys too, because if they walk in, he's gonna ask them a bunch of questions, which I hate to laugh about this. I know you mentioned it, Joe, that, like, he's got this like air of seriousness about him. But then the way that he delivers things is incredibly hilarious to me at times, because he'll read the transcripts to them, and so he'll be like, so it says here in the chat that you wanted to bend her over a barrel and show her the 50 states. What did you mean by that? And you're just like, dude, did you rehearse that? Like, that's like, how do you do that, man? And there's some just horrific things these guys are saying to these decoys online. And Chris Hansen's just right there saying this stuff blunt to them. And you could just see the blood leave their faces when he does that. I mean, it's...
And I would like to say every time, but not entirely true. Not every single time where these guys like, fuck, I got caught. I don't know what to say. And, I mean, a vast majority of the time, though, they will be like, I'm stupid. I don't know what I was doing. I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm doing this. And really what they're saying is that they can't believe they got caught. But one thing that always got me every single time when they would show it was when these guys would specifically either say while they were caught, or they would chat to the decoy, like, before they met, saying, like, you know, I watched Dateline and I don't want to be like caught and arrested because of this meeting. And then they go and do it anyway. And lo and behold, they end up on Dateline.
See, and that's the part of it that I don't think I will ever be able to understand. And it's not that I want to understand what these guys are thinking.
No.
But it's the concept that, for one, they're even out there doing this.
Yeah.
Like that's already the part I can't get past. But then when they start to go through the reasoning about what these guys are saying and what they're doing, this interview process usually unveils some of these same things, despite these guys maybe not even knowing each other, but committing the same crimes.
Yeah.
And the one that I always remember hearing about, you said, yeah, I'm just being stupid. But then you hear the guys that are saying, oh, well, I showed up to talk the kid out of doing this. And it's like, how is it, Joe? Once again, we don't understand what these guys are doing. But why would so many different people that get caught doing these things come up with the same excuses?
I think it's just because it's the first thing that'll come to mind. Like, you're here, what can you say to not get in trouble? And the thing that makes the most sense is, well, I know what I'm doing here. I was just trying to prevent that from happening with anyone else. I just wanted to talk to her. And it's like, well, then why didn't you just say that online, dude? You could say, hey, like, you probably shouldn't be talking to older dudes online. And then you just stop talking to them. And that's what you do. Or, as soon as you figure out someone's, like, under the age of 18 and you're trying to meet people online, you say goodbye. Right then and there. That's what you should do. But as to why they do this and why they think that's going to work, your guess is as good as mine. And some of them do some more outlandish things than others, because believe it or not, in one of these seasons, there's a guy who you would think, because he's sitting there nice and calm during this whole thing, is about to lead in with that, like, oh, I'm here to talk her out of it and that you shouldn't be doing this. Instead of doing that, he just says, yeah, I'm here. I need you to go to my car and grab a note and grab something out of the glove compartment.
Oh my God.
And like at first, like, was this guy got a gun? Is it like what's going on in there? Because he's admitting like he's not trying to get out of this. He seems to be accepting his fate. And then you've got law enforcement goes to his car, takes out a note, and apparently it's this pre-made note saying how he fully expected this to be Dateline, NBC, and this was going to be something to try and catch him in the act. But what he's really there to do is to talk someone out of engaging with people online, and that he fully intended just to be there to talk. And it's like, you thought that was going to work? That having a pre-written note from yourself, from the past, was going to work here? When despite you just said the raunchiest stuff to someone who you thought was 13 years old online. You thought that note was going to save you. And that's, yeah, like some of these things that these guys do, on top of one, it's, of course, horrible, mind-blowing that they would try it in the first place. Even more crazy, or like, not more crazy, but it just adds to the crazy that they thought they could talk themselves out of it or pre-prepare something like this to get themselves out of it.
And that alone is already kind of terrifying enough because I think people may have a short-term memory for the internet and exactly what it's been like throughout the years. Because back then, I mean, I think it's even scarier to think about people doing this back then, because it was that much harder to kind of go back and look for history and to see things that people were doing. And sure, you could probably piece some of it together, but if you were a teenager or a kid or something and you were messaging someone online, your parents may not know what happened to you. Because if you're using a different login, if you're using a different account and they don't know your password, which a lot of us do, all of a sudden that kid goes missing and you're like, shit, what happens now? And so if anything, there's some good to come out of this, because I've seen other people who will do similar operations, even Chris Hansen himself, where they will set up the kids. Like they know the kids are talking to people online, and then they'll set them up with the parents to confront them. And so it was an interesting exercise just from that part of it alone. But one last thing I'll say, Joe, about the creeps that showed up to this. That note was really scary to me, but the scariest stuff is when the guys are asking the decoys to come to their car with them.
Yes.
You know, and if that wasn't terrifying enough, then there was instances of some of these guys showing up who actually have like guns and rope, and like binding materials that are in their cars. And I mean, it's seriously like, I was about to say as a parent, but I almost said as a child owner, it does scare me in a different way then than it does now. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's if it's not that, then it's these absolute shitbags that have kids who are the same age.
Yeah.
And doing that kind of thing.
No, and like again, like things that just completely like are sickening is that like there are episodes where like there are teachers who go on here and they're teaching and coaching people the ages that they think they're meeting online to do this with. And it's absolutely sickening. It's absolutely disgusting when you see this happen, which also is kind of to the point where I was bringing up earlier that it was this interesting like piece of pop culture and what it says about both the people on it and the people watching it. And that like it's horrible, it's disgusting, and for some reason like we couldn't look away. We kept coming back every week to see these guys just getting caught week in and week out trying to do this.
It's almost like watching a live erosion of society happen before you. Because, as you mentioned, there are teachers that are out there doing this, which, Joe, I'm not condemning teachers, by the way. But there were doctors, there were military that were doing this. I mean, there's like
religious leaders, too.
Yeah, yeah, there was a rabbi in one episode, for Christ's sake, man. No pun intended. And that kind of thing, it as I say, the erosion of society, like, I'm sorry, Joe, but I took the advice of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Walter Donovan. I don't trust anyone, okay? I've been doing that since the early 90s. Now, after watching this, it's like if you did trust anybody, who do you trust now after seeing some of this stuff? Ugh, makes you sick to your stomach, doesn't it?
It does. And I guess, like, I don't know, that's almost like the weird thing, because it's when you think of, like, who do you trust, like, the adults were all pretty straightforward when they thought they were talking to minors. None of them were lying about, like, oh, no, I'm in my teens, too. We should meet up. Or, like, oh, no, you should, like, totally trust me. No, they were flat out, like, telling them that they're in their 30s or 40s and saying exactly what they wanted to do when they met up. So, and that's, like, I know, like, the modern, like, thing that we have is, like catfishing has been a thing where, like, but even that, like, you post, like, a better-looking photo of yourself or someone else, and then you go online, you meet someone, and, oh, you're not like what the picture said. But there's nothing necessarily illegal. It's just you're kind of a douchebag for doing it. You're a dick. Horrible person. But it wasn't like what was going on here. And it was maddening each week to kind of watch it and watch these people do it. And also just, like, I don't know, like, seeing them and the way they react. Like you said, a lot of them break down, a lot of them don't know what they're doing. And I mean, there are other times, like, a guy brought, like, a pizza and beer to, like, have with someone who he thought was 14. And when Hansen is like letting him know, like, dude, you fucked up and we're calling you on it, he fucking sits down and just starts eating his pizza right in front of him and just, like, moan it down, like, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't know what you're talking about. I didn't do anything. No, we didn't actually do anything. We just talked.
What's interesting about that is this show did go through some changes, as we mentioned in the very beginning. And what you actually referred to is a project that happened later, which we'll get to. But this show actually, surprisingly, with all of the accolades and the ratings and people tuning in, this show actually got canceled in 2008. It only had a run of about 4 years. And they would play a lot of this in syndication, of course. But the reason why it got canceled was this pile-up effect of the legality issues that they went through. And most of the time, they would provide stuff to the cops and then it would go nowhere, or they couldn't prosecute based on how they acquired either the transcripts or whatever. Like, it was viewed as entrapment for a while.
Yeah.
But the true point of cancellation occurred when a Texas assistant district attorney committed suicide after he was found out going through this process with them and perverted justice and all that. And Joe, I remember watching this when it came out because of how shocking it was, because they went to his house and they're literally recording the whole thing. This Rockwall County, his name was Louis Conrad, and they're outside of his house with cops and cameras and all this stuff. They can clearly see someone was in the house, and then it just goes completely silent, and then there's a gunshot. And that was the point where they're like, okay, gonna have to redo this one.
Yep.
We're gonna have to take this down.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, it was horrific to have basically a suicide live broadcast. Obviously, we don't see it or anything.
No, but I mean, you know it. Yeah, like it's, you know it's happening. Mm-hmm. And like and that's you go through watching this, and like I am like, you know, a lot of times I think, you know, I'm all about second chances these days. To quote a fantastic movie. And people who do their time for crimes that they committed, whether they spend that in jail, they do community service, they do what they're supposed to go through rehabilitation and punishment and come back out and try to reenter society, and how difficult that can be for them. You know, you can always hope that someone gets the second chance that they have, I don't know if you want to say deserved, or they've earned, or that they have almost should have covered them, because they're human beings and they did make mistakes and they've paid for them. Like, for instance, you can, like, I know like how much a lot of people, animal rights activists and animal lovers alone, will really hate Michael Vick for what he did around this time with dog fighting. And like, he pays millions of dollars in fines. I think he does jail time. He does community service work. He has to actively go around, like, going about how horrible dog fighting is, and he gives money to shelters and is doing everything he can, and still gets a ton of flack from people, and that's their prerogative. And when you look at this show, and you will have people who on camera say that my life is ruined because of this, I cannot say how many times I watched that and just said to myself, or said out loud, and rightfully so. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, you tried to have sex with someone who is very well underage. Yes, your life should be ruined for this. And it's hard for me, especially on this, to be like, should they be able to come back from that? And what should that look like? Is it a permanent registry with their name that they're a sex offender, that they're notified whenever they're within an area? Like, what does that second chance look like? What are its limitations like? But certainly you would never want someone to actually kill themselves over it.
So obviously I think we're in agreement on that point. But what do you say to the people that Chris Hansen catches more than once? Because that happened on this show where, yep, someone gets let go and you think, okay, maybe they're scared straight, they're going to go do this, get help and all that, but then they get caught again. And like I said, it didn't happen just once. It happened more than once.
Yeah.
Same people getting caught. Like, what do you say to those people?
God, I don't even know. Like, I'm trying to think of, like, being Chris Hansen in that moment and being like, what do I say when I come out? Like, I'm not, you don't open with the same mind as last time, saying, do you have trouble finding the place? I have a seat over there. Like, do you just come out and be like, seriously? You fucking kidding me, guy? Like, this is how we're meeting again? Like, what do you do? I feel like at that point in time, like, I don't know how charges either didn't stick, or maybe they need to be more severe. Because, like, if you get caught doing that shit twice, like, yeah, you should go away for a considerably long period of time. Because clearly it didn't sink in, and whatever was done to you to try and make it so that you wouldn't do this again didn't work.
And honestly, that's the question I've been asking too, because this brings up the point of, what are we actually trying to achieve with this show? And some of the critics of this show were stating that, yes, you're trying to prove that there's a problem in society and address it. Okay, I think most of us can get behind that.
Yeah.
But then it comes to the opposing point where it's like, you're supposed to report the news, but you're creating news right now.
Yeah.
And so the outlet that I think was missing throughout all of this was that if you truly are trying to point out something, are you actually trying to help the people that you're catching?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I think would be the component that might maybe, pull more people towards the positive side of this argument, which is if, like, once you catch these people, if there's a way for them to get help and you're helping facilitate that and not just bringing them to the police, it makes you wonder what could potentially happen out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, there are definitely people who, like, on the show, after they get caught, it seems like they're happy they got caught because that may have been what they needed to actually get help to try and change their lifestyle and who they are and to prevent themselves from doing this again. But it is, again, like that blurry line where journalists are supposed to remain neutral, that they're supposed to, like, just show what's happening and be, like, on the periphery so that people can see what's going on. And, there are times where, like, obviously that breaks in a good manner when you've got journalists, like, I forget his name. He was reporting on, I think, like, either I think it was after a major storm or a tsunami, and how people are, like, washing up to the shore, and they're struggling to make it there, and he drops his microphone, he just goes and starts helping. And like those are moments where, like, okay, we can see how like the need to help has overcome the need to report a story, and that maybe that's the right thing to do. This is where that blurs, where yes, maybe doing this once or twice to show this is the issue and this is what you should do with your child to try and make sure that it does not happen to them would be like a good way to do that, where you're still remaining neutral, you're showing what the problem is, you're giving ideas and how you can protect your loved ones from the issue. But when you keep doing it for, like you said, was it 8 seasons? 4 seasons?
For 4, yeah.
4 seasons, yeah. It was 2008, yeah. For 4 years. When you keep doing it for 4 years, it seems like you're doing it for ratings more than you are to report anything. And that's where that line is kind of messy more than blurry, is that you're not doing it to help, you're not doing it to help a report, you're doing it to help yourself. And I think I do start to see an issue with the show after a while, yes.
Well, but then you got to kind of look at it a different way too, because after 2008, obviously it gets canceled. Chris Hansen hangs around Dateline a little bit longer because he's been in broadcast journalism for forever. But he goes through a messy divorce, and a lot of people kind of got on his case, because I think he actually cheated on his wife and all this personal stuff that frankly is none of my business. But he would actually continue to try and revive the show, and he would actually get it back in 2014. I think they went to just MSNBC or one of the cable networks, ended up doing Hansen versus Predator, which is a very similar show. But now he's doing this through a YouTube channel called True Blue, which is Takedown with Chris Hansen. And that's where this guy eating the pizza, having the time of his life came up.
Yeah.
And I think the part of this that scares me now, almost 20 years later, Joe, is that in the beginning, it seemed like there was never a shortage of just like low intelligence guys that just decided to go on the internet. And this is where they wound up on a Friday night. On this version of it, it feels like you're getting people who are actually intelligent people that are going out and doing this stuff now. There was like an engineering student that was like, had a full ride scholarship that showed up to one of these things. He was like 22 years old. You're just speechless after a while. Like, I don't know what to say.
I don't either, because especially, at that age, like, you're 22, you're in college, you are at what should be the best, worst time of your life, in that you are literally hot garbage in your 20s, because you are still relatively worthless. And I say this as a former 20-year-old who's not too far removed from them, or it's further removed than I care to admit. But I remember as like in my 20s, functionally pretty useless. Yeah, I could pay some bills here and there. I held a steady job. But ask me for any life advice, I've got nothing for you. At that age, like, why are you going to minors? Like, you are at this great garbage time of your life where you can have fun and with few repercussions as long as you're doing it with willing people.
So you're trying to say in less words that college is an all-you-can-fuck buffet. Why are guys going after young teenagers?
Yeah, I'm confused over that. Like, there's someone out there for you if you just keep trying. That's I guess really like my dating advice for anyone. There's someone out there if you just keep trying the right way, not the creepy way. Don't give up. You'll find someone who likes you. It'll happen eventually.
When people say there's plenty of fish in the sea, they don't mean go after the ones that were just born. You know,
No.
that's the whole point of that. But there's another thread that kind of pops out of this, okay? So, not even related to Chris Hansen. After he's made the show, 20 years later, we've got the rise of social media, and there are people out there trying to copy what he's doing.
Yep.
And that's something that I absolutely cannot get behind. Because most of the time these are like dudes that are, fairly bulky. They're large guys that are doing this. But I just do not think that is the best use of their time at all.
No.
I mean, and this is one of the few times, Joe, where I'm going to go against Batman here, okay? The vigilanteism, it doesn't work when you haven't been trained in the League of Shadows, okay?
On someone's YouTube channel, they're like calling some guy out in a Walmart for what he's doing, who he thinks he's meeting there, and then out walk Chris Hansen and says, "Don't do this. Don't let me catch you out here again." And they're like, "What makes me so different from you?" And Chris Hansen just looks him dead in the eye and says, "I'm not wearing hockey pads." Like,
not wearing hockey pads. Yeah, that's honestly, I think, if I had to say that, like, there's one thing about To Catch a Predator that I absolutely cannot stand. It's the fact that no matter what you do on TV, there's likely going to be someone who wants to copy that success.
Yeah.
And this is something that I absolutely cannot stand behind, because most of the time when these guys are going out there trying to copy Chris Hansen, they're talking to these guys in a parking lot, that you can barely even hear what they're saying. You don't even really know if the guys that they caught are even gonna, it's worse, because at least on this show, you can see these guys kind of going, "Oh fuck, I screwed up," and it's setting in, the reality is setting in. But these other guys that they find on these social media channels and stuff, there's really no consequence. I don't see any. It's just like, shake his hand and say, "Go with Christ, brother." I mean, I don't know what they're doing.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's weight behind, a guy following someone into a house, and then out pops Chris Hansen. He tells you to sit down, like he's he's your principal who just caught you doing something, like smoking in the bathroom. Like, here we go. I guess I'm in trouble. And then he gives you the spiel, and all of a sudden a whole camera crew walks out, and like, oh shit. Then you get hit with a little more weight, and then like, okay, you can leave, and you have to I have to believe that, as dumb as these guys were that were caught on the show, when they're told, okay, you can leave now after these first few seasons, and they've seen the show, they know what's waiting for them as soon as they walk out of the door. There's weight to every layer of that interaction. And when it is just some random guy with a YouTube channel who is with probably a selfie stick recording everything that's going on, there's nothing stopping them from doing this again or trying elsewhere. They're getting away. They'll again, like before, they'll just change their screen name, and they'll keep going. You're not doing any good. You're not saving anyone. You're not preventing it from happening again. It's like you said, like, it's hard to get behind, because you kind of feel like they're just doing it to promote themselves.
Yeah. Yep. And to really, the whole point I think I wanted to drive home in bringing this up as a topic, Joe, is that it is an incredibly important conversation to have, regardless of whether or not this is with your kids, if you have kids, family members, whatever. Like, this is a very difficult topic to talk about just in general. And this show helped normalize talking about how real this stuff is. I mean, did the dark web exist back then? Yes, it did in some forms. but it's even worse now.
Yeah.
And so the concept here is that it's a very important discussion to have, regardless of how uncomfortable and strange it can be. And that's really what I think we can thank Chris Hansen for, if you don't agree with everything else, is that point. So, on the other side of that coin, Joe, it is entertaining as hell to watch, and I will continue to watch it.
Yeah, it's I will, the amount of people I give crap for liking reality television because they watch it for like the drama that happens on The Bachelor or like the absolute trash that is Vanderpump Rules, that they're like, oh, it's because I can watch this and have this drama without having the drama in my life. But like, but why do you need the drama? Doesn't that say something about you, that you need that in your life? And then here I am, years removed from To Catch a Predator, and how I sat in and watched the show. I'm like, God, yeah, this is horrible, but I need to watch it. I don't know if this show worked it out of my system. Like, I don't need to see the shitty real life anymore. Please give me something scripted that I can enjoy. And by scripted, something scripted well, because everyone knows that all the other reality shit's scripted as it is. But yeah, like there is definitely some commentary to be had about the people who needed to watch this every week while it was on.
Yeah. But hey, Joe, as you talk about things being scripted, this show absolutely is not. And with that, we thank you for listening to Digital Dissection. As always, we appreciate everything the Dissection crew does for us week after week. Your support does go an incredibly long way. And if you happen upon this show by accident, which Joe and I are always shocked that still happens, why not drop us a review or comment on the show?
We also love hearing from you, so feel free to message us over at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com, as we welcome all your ideas for future shows and, well, anything you would like to discuss. And until next time, in all seriousness, please be careful with your online interactions and who you choose to meet and spend your time with. And, of course, keep on dissecting.